Welcome back. You are tuned in to Traders Nation. My pleasure to have with us here today Hank Moore, author of The Business Tree, Growth Strategies and Tactics for Surviving and Thriving. Most importantly, Hank, welcome to Traders Nation. How are you today?
Hi, Kurt.
Good.
Glad to be with you.
My pleasure, Hank. My pleasure. Hank, where do the world's most successful companies get these great ideas?
Well, a lot of them don't. Sometimes they learn them the hard way. I've been around for about 40 years, and sometimes trial and error. You learn a lot of times from the mistakes of other companies.
Sure. All right. So here's the thing about trial and error, and I don't want to get on the politics side of things, but shouldn't we learn from our mistakes? I mean, isn't that where the growth comes from, Hank?
Absolutely. I've steered about 500 strategic plans for companies, and one of the first things we do is look at what the competition has done wrong, and we learn from it.
Right.
And of course, I've been preaching this for a lot of years. We need to learn. Business still has not learned from the .com bust. They still haven't learned from the Enron scandal.
Right.
And I wrote the first report for Congress about Enron.
Yeah.
And they just don't want to learn. And I think the more we can learn, the more we can short circuit the next business downturn, and there will be one if people don't learn.
You know, Hank, you mentioned the competition. We should learn from our competition. I agree with you wholeheartedly. How much should we keep an eye on our competition in that regard, Frank? I mean, it's almost like taking the eye off the ball, but is it really? Because we need to know what they're doing anyways, don't we?
Well, yeah. In the book, I have the business tree model that I originally developed about 20 years ago, and I've been refining, and the case studies in the book are about 200 examples of how it's been used.
Yeah.
Looking at the competition is part of what I call body of knowledge, and it's the trunk and roots of the tree. It's not the main thing you do. The main thing you need to do is look at your core business, running your own business, the financial, your people, and your business development.
Yeah.
But then you have to look at the relationship of all the parts of your own organization together, and then part of it is looking outside your company and looking at marketplace influences. That has to factor in the planning. It's not something you do every day. One of the biggest problems of most companies is they're looking too much at other companies and say, I want what they have. I want their billings. I want their sales. I want their reputation, without understanding that they've probably got a lot more going for them than they give themselves credit for having.
Sure. And that's pretty important for companies to develop effective strategies, right, and succeed. Because I know not all companies do that. In fact, companies do fail if they can't develop those types of strategies, right?
Research tells us that only 2% of the businesses in America have any kind of a plan at all. That means 98% do not. And what a lot of them think are plans or sales goals or something that are part of a plan. And most companies fail because they don't know where they're going. They don't know how they're going to get there. And developing a strategy does not have to be a big esoteric mumbo-jumbo exercise.
Sure.
Sometimes at this time of year when people are planning, what are we going to do in the coming year? It can be a couple of pages of strategy. It doesn't have to be anything big. Now, in the book, The Business Tree, we talk about how to develop those strategies because most books don't talk about it. Most consultants have never developed big picture strategies because that's not their business.
Yeah, Hank, you said it. 2 pages, it can be just as simple as that because you can effectively build a roadmap from a couple pages of strategies,
and
right?
Without any kind of a roadmap. In bigger companies, and I've certainly captained those, the bigger companies, sometimes you have to spend a year doing a strategic planning process because you're having events and receptions and meetings and getting buy-in and all that, nonsense, in which you have to do. You wage it like a political campaign. But in a smaller business, and I think one of the things that I love doing, and I'm going to do it right now, is to pat small business on the back. Small business, and a lot of people listening are smaller companies, is 99% of the businesses in America, and I think that small business does more strategic planning than they may not use the formal terminology that you and I use, but they're doing it instinctively. And I think that the average small business person who's listening today probably wears about 10 hats every day. And during the course of doing business, they get pretty darn good at about 8 of them, which is 7.5 hats more than the average corporate mid-manager ever gets good at.
Hank, would you say small business is always on? Let's face it, you mentioned instinctively. I don't know how many times I've solved problems in my sleep. I'm at dinner and the family's like, where are you at? And I was like, I'm thinking.
Right.
Isn't that true? Isn't that true to be said for small business? We're always on.
Yes, and I think a lot of people relish it, and a lot of people do very good at it. And one of those 8 hats that small business people wear is, in my book, what I call the big picture. You know, most corporations don't know. I go in and people say to me all the time, small business people, well, gee, you know, you work with Marriott and Disney and Hewlett-Packard and all these big guys,
right.
Texaco. And boy, if I had all of their resources, what could I do with my small business? And I say, trust me, you don't want their headaches. Most of the time, the right hand and the left hand don't know each other. They don't know what a strategy is. So someone like me has to say, here's a strategy. And then once we leave the room, that's one of the reasons I'm kind of invisible. Once we leave the room, they're their ideas.
Well, maybe the corporations, the larger corporations, are having the problems with strategies because there's too many pieces of the puzzle, meaning people and management, that are spread all over the place versus the smaller organizations.
Right.
You're in a tighter area, and most likely, like you said, they wear 10, 15 hats at a time. It's all in one place, this strategy.
Well, and there are a lot of reasons why a lot of these companies avoid the big picture. A lot of them never really had it.
Yeah.
A lot of times what they think they're doing. I was working with a large oil company, and they got in the trouble, and they were in the media about diversity. They got in trouble, and I was hired to go read the riot act to their board of directors in closed-door session. And I started explaining what diversity really was, and they said, well, you know, this diversity thing isn't all that bad. I said, no, it isn't. It's all about being what you can be. Yes, you don't want to say inappropriate things about employees,
right.
But diversity is so much more than that. Earlier in my career, I was one of the authors of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, so obviously diversity is one of my important topics, but diversity as it relates to small business means you can enter new marketplaces, you can go global, you can be faster than the other guys who are too busy playing politics in corporations. So to small business people listening, you know, the business tree basically means look at the whole, then look at the parts as they relate to the whole, and then look back at the whole again. But, you know, a lot of people just, it's so simple and it's so common sense. That's all it's about.
Yeah.
And I've got about 200 examples where companies did that, and they found themselves entering new markets and doing these things. And I think this business correction period that we're in right now, some people call it a recession.
Yeah.
I think it in many ways is a message to small business, hey, do what you're doing, do it a little better, and if you do that, then you're going to be poised to avoid the next downturn. There is another downturn coming, and I'm predicting the next recession in about 4 years because big business still doesn't get it.
Yeah. All right.
They still don't get that they need to change or benefit from change.
Hank, we got about a minute left. How can a business not only survive right now but thrive? We got about a minute left. What are your thoughts on that, Hank?
Number one, with a bullet, focus on the customer. I'm going to tell you a word that I learned about 10 years ago. It's called POTLACHE, P-O-T-L-A-C-H-E.
Okay.
Customer service and customer-focused management. If every management decision is based on a customer, then you're going to really survive better. The research tells us that business that by retaining 2% of your customers from deflecting has a bigger impact on your bottom line than cutting 10% out of operating expenses. So it's focus on the customer, focus on what you're doing right, and refine it.
Nice. All right, there you have it. Hank Moore is with us today. The Business Tree is the name of the book, Growth Strategies and Tactics for Surviving and Thriving. Hank, I sure hope 2010 is going to be a year of past survive and into thrive. Hank, where can we find a copy of the Business Tree here today?
It's all the online, BarnesandNoble.com, Amazon.com. It's going into bookstores in January, but it's available online.
All right, there you have it.
Presently.
Sure. The Business Tree is the name of the book. Hank, do you have a website? What about a website?
Yes, I do. www.hankmoore.com.
All right, hankmoore.com. Let's throw his name up on the screen so everybody can see what the spelling is. Once again, hankmoore.com. Head on over there today.
One word, lowercase, hankmoore.com.
There you have it. And head out today. Wherever you can get a book, fine book.
Yeah.
Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com. Just get a copy. The Business Tree is the name of the book. Hank, thanks for your time today on Traders Nation.
Honored to be with you. Call again sometime.
You're more than welcome. I wish we had more time, too, by the way.